Todd Furman is with us, CBS Sports, and you can see him on social media at Todd Furman. He is with us on the Alexander Shannara Trial Attorneys Hotline. If Stanford is going to be a 2.5 point dog at Hawaii, where are they going to win a game, Furman? I know you don't have their schedule committed to memory, but they play the ACC schedule. They play Notre Dame. They do have San Jose State. Is this team going to win anything this year?
Talk about a program in transition, and one that I don't think anticipated being here with Troy Taylor getting fired for some of the off-field antics above all else. It's going to take a little while for Andrew Luck as the general manager of this program to build Stanford back into what we grew accustomed to. Harbaugh, and when he handed the baton off to David Shaw before it really fell off a cliff. But when you're a road underdog against the Hawaii program that hasn't beaten a team from a Power 4 conference since 2019, not a ringing endorsement by any stretch of the imagination. There will be a couple of SEC opportunities for them, maybe at home against Boston College early on or late in the year against Cal. But Stanford is a team, barring the market not over-adjusting on some of their numbers, that I can't see wanting to back on a regular basis. Now, that does come with a caveat, because if this game got out to 3, I would be slightly intrigued by the Cardinal here. But there's a reason that Hawaii went from a short home underdog into a favorite. And I have to imagine the way that Hawaii and Coach Timmy Chang have talked about this game is this is one of the more important games they'll play all season to try and set the tone for a team that, in my opinion, has to get bowl eligible if Timmy Chang is going to keep his job.
All right, so Dunaway did his best to embarrass Furman with his 3 guarantees. So we're going to let Furman redeem himself. Here are 3 guarantees from one of the smartest guys we ever talk to each week, Todd Furman, for the college football season. What you got, Furman?
And look, boys, you guys know that just because we say guarantees, I'm not taking any of the low-hanging fruit. So we're going to live dangerously. So Dunaway, mark these down. And we do this 365 days from now, you'll be able to embarrass me as well. We're going to take long shots in the Big 12, and I think we could see history repeating itself with teams coming from off the pace. So I'm going to say that either Arizona or Houston will be one of the 2 teams that gets the Big 12 championship game. Both of those teams priced at 40-1 or greater to win the league.
Wow.
I think we could see one of those teams really come and surprise some folks, to say the least. I am also going to buy stock in Carson Beck getting invited to New York for the Heisman Trophy. Not sure he's going to win it, but I think he has a bounce-back performance, and it could start as early as next Sunday against this Notre Dame Fighting Irish defense as he looks to try and resurrect his draft status amongst all else. And I'll look to try and find one in the NFL as well. The Miami Dolphins will not go to the NFL playoffs this year. They will underwhelm. So I'm taking the low-hanging fruit because, gentlemen, I got to stick it to you one way or another.
When he said the Miami Dolphins, we were off camera. I shot straight up in my chair, Furman. I thought you were going to make my day.
Nope, I can't do that. But you know what? All kidding aside with the Dolphins, I'm going to say, instead I'll go in a different direction, that the Tampa Bay Buccaneers will not win the NFC South for the first time over the last couple of years. So that's for Dunaway more so than you, Brownie. I don't want to kick a man while he's down.
Okay, Bucs do not win. Okay,
staying away from the Rams.
Yeah, I mean, Matt Stafford is the one of the quarterbacks involved here.
Here's the thing that I'm concerned about with the Rams. I mean, I've read this Matthew Stafford conspiracy theory out there that he's actually dead, and it's a clone of Matthew Stafford that's playing quarterback. I don't know if you guys have seen that ridiculous story.
I have not.
But by NFL standards, I have never encountered anything like it, and I'll make sure I send it over to you guys.
Hey, by the way, not only do I think the Bucs make the playoffs, I think they win the Super Bowl.
That is a bold claim. We'll see what that offense looks like without Liam Cohen there calling the shots. We saw how Kentucky football fell off a cliff when he wasn't there. So I think we could see a little bit of regression from Baker Mayfield. And if Tristan Wirfs isn't out there sooner rather than later, that offensive line isn't nearly as formidable as it is without one of the best left tackles in the game.
He would not be the worst quarterback ever.
As the alarm says, it is time to wake up football. Monday morning live, back for year number 3 now. Tom Luginbill, Jim Dunaway ready to go. And as P. Smitty says early in the chat, happy welcome to real game week, not week 0. It is week 1. It's all brought to you by our friends at MyBookie, mybookie.ag. Promo code next round. We'll give you details on all the great stuff at mybookie.ag to help you enjoy the season in a moment. But first, welcome back the other man in the box. What's in the box? It's Tom Luginbill.
How we doing, man? Good morning to you. Happy college football.
Happy college football. I know your ACC Network extensive tour and work will get us some great insight. We'll talk about all the big games coming up, which, by the way, first time since 1950. We have 3 top 10 matchups in the opening weekend. We'll get to those in a second. But first, let's look in the rearview mirror, brought to you by our friends at mybookie.ag. The Farmageddon game for the 109th time. Sloppy, entertaining, but sloppy football.
Yeah, and I think let's just put out the weather and set that aside for just a minute. You know, when you come into a season, remember, you got about 3.5 weeks, maybe 4 max, no preseason games. So what do you get concerned about? You get concerned about the kicking game, pre-snap penalties, and turnovers. Like those are the 3 things that coaches are going to harp on in terms of having clean play. And you're playing against somebody else for the first time. And what did we see? We saw some sloppy play. I would have loved to have seen this game played without the weather elements because both teams are really good on defense. Both teams have quarterbacks that came into the season highly touted, very, very productive a year ago. And what I noticed early on, Jim, was, and I actually texted Dave Pasch and Dusty Dvorak, which was my former broadcast partners, and I said, Avery Johnson can't throw a wet football. And when he showed that repeatedly he could not control the ball, and Iowa State could control it just a little bit better, that really kind of transitioned and changed after the 2 swapped turnovers there early on, the tone of the game, because at least Iowa State could move the ball with the forward pass if they needed to because Rocco Beck handled it better. But then in the second half, when things started to dry up, we started to see a little bit of a different Avery Johnson. I thought going down the stretch to try to get into a 1-possession game was exactly what everybody wanted to see, ultra competitive. And then I also thought it was interesting, man. We're in week 0, Jim, and 2 coaches had to make 2 risky decisions with less than 10 minutes to go in the fourth quarter. A lot of people scratching their heads about Chris Klieman and Kansas State with 8 minutes and 30 seconds to go on 4th down, deciding to go for it, and they don't get it. And, in my estimation, the reason why they did that was watch how the second half unfolded. Kansas State couldn't stop the run. I think Chris Klieman was really worried about getting his defense off the field, and if he couldn't, they weren't going to get another possession, and they ended up getting another possession. But I can see – I'm not saying I necessarily agree with it with that amount of time left and where you're at on the field on your own 30, but I can see why he did that when you looked at the tone of the second half. So a lot of fun. I thought it was a great way to kick off college football, and I just wish the weather would have been better for both teams.
Yeah, field conditions not very good. On that decision, I didn't follow. I mean, I followed him at North Dakota State, Klieman, but I just pictured the way they always play football at North Dakota State and really at Kansas State, that he was a really conservative guy. But as I watched him make that decision with just over 8 minutes to go on the 29-yard line in those conditions on a soccer field in Europe, I wonder if they've got regrets of giving up their home game, playing that over there, because I feel like even if it had been a week 0 game in Manhattan, I feel like that may have played out a little different for Kansas State.
Yeah, it could have. I think it could have played out, really from a weather perspective entirely different. Even over there, even if you play the game over in Ireland, obviously your temperatures were good, but that was a really sloppy track, a wet, heavy ball. There were factors involved. And listen, I got to commend Matt Campbell, because when you have those types of scenarios and you interject factors and elements that are not involved in your pre-practice, your game plan, all of these different things that you're trying to line up that you have to get right, you have to do, and then you have all of a sudden these different factors added into the equation, oftentimes it comes down to who handles that the best. Like who can somehow say, I don't care that the ball's wet. I don't care that I could lose my footing. I don't care that we're having a hard time in the passing game. If you can mentally get past that, then you immediately have, I think, an advantage. And that was what Iowa State did over the course of 4 quarters, better than what Kansas State did. But you combine that call, you combine what led up to that call, and you go back and you watch Iowa State on offense absolutely run the ball down Kansas State's throat for the entirety of the second half. I think that really, really worried Chris Kleiman.
Yeah, good win for Matt Campbell. We'll see how it impacts the Big 12 race. Iowa State over Kansas State, 24-21. We got big previews of Alabama's opener and Auburn's opener coming up, and a look at the Week 1 games. A little bit more on what we saw this weekend. After I remind you, fine folks, that our friends at MyBookie, they're back. It's time to start celebrating like it's 2025 right now and betting like it's 2025 with our friends at MyBookie, mybookie.ag. If you're new to MyBookie, use our code. You see it on the screen there. It is next round. Use our code, and your first bet up to $500 is fully covered. What I mean here, you make a play. If it doesn't hit, well, you get it right back with the bet back bonus. No stress, just a one-time rollover on the return bet. So you're free to reload and keep firing right there. MyBookie.ag, promo code next round. Go win and brag to all your buddies in the chat room just how good you are at MyBookie.ag, promo code next round. Speaking of the chat room, good morning. College football is back with Dunaway and Lug, says Chris. We're glad to be part of everybody's Monday morning. If you're watching us on YouTube, any of the video platforms, if you're about to get in your car, or you always get in your car at this point, or your truck, because we're in the South. I drive a truck, you drive a truck, we all drive a truck. Audio platform too, you can do it right there on the app as well. So we are on all the platforms for you there. Morgan, who's listening to us in Louisville, dude absolutely went off on Maverick McIver. A good weekend for Maverick there. What about the Jalen Daniels and the other Kansas team? They get a win over Fresno, 31-7. Can you buy your way into big-time football? That stadium, I've been there at the old Gale Sailor Stadium. Woo! It was a dump. Renovated, they look good, great facilities, team played well. What do you think of Kansas?
Top-down alignment. You just have to make the decision as a university, whether it's the Board of Regents, whether it's the Board of Trustees, the president, athletic director. All right, Kansas is a tremendous basketball program. But if you're going to succeed in your greatest revenue producer, you have to invest. I give Kansas a ton of credit. I give Lance Leipold a ton of credit for giving credence to why they should do it by putting out a quality product over the last few years. And if you watch that game, Jalen Daniels is a problem. Now, can he stay healthy? That's the whole key to the Kansas season, as it's been each time he's been the quarterback. You go back to 2 years ago, I believe it was the Big 12 Offensive Player of the Year. If you stay healthy, he is going to be a handful. I'm really excited to see how that team continues to flourish. Now they're going to have an actual home field advantage when they play, which they have rarely, if ever, had before. There's excitement around the program. Players believe that the university wants football to be good. The community now knows that the university is pushing for football to become a power. So I was really, really impressed. I don't know how good Fresno is going to be this year, but as far as, not having sloppiness, you're Jalen Daniels, you don't turn the ball over. 3 touchdowns through the air. You're 18 of 20 through the air. Yeah. Had another 47 yards on the ground. The play is never over. He just creates so much strain for opposing defenses that I came away impressed with him. And Jim, we've talked about this each and every year. You got to be very, very careful not to, make definitive statements about what we saw off of week 1. You go back to 2014 and Virginia Tech goes up in week 2 in the horseshoe and dismantles Ohio State. The very next week, Virginia Tech loses at home to East Carolina. Ohio State goes and wins the national championship on their third quarterback in the same year. And so we're going to have some of those knee-jerk reactions coming off of week 1, too. But it was certainly a good, clean start for Kansas.
It absolutely was. 2 other quick games, and then we'll jump into previewing Bama and Auburn and the rest of the big games in week 1. Tom Luginbill, Jim Dunaway. It's Monday Morning Live. As some of you are saying, I forgot this even happened. Smuff says, morning. I had forgotten about this. Monday Morning Live, 3 years here. Cacklin saying, or Caklin, people hit that thumbs up button there. And that helps us out a lot as we, the hundreds of you that are watching right now, thank you guys for being with us on all of our video platforms as we get going today. Concern and then impress. Concerned with UNLV, I thought they would boat race lowly Idaho State. Idaho State doesn't get into my what's it called in severe weather when you have the
your radar?
It's the radar, but down here, James Spann has me. It's not about a county anymore. It's my not algorithm. It's a I can't remember. It's a zone. It's not an equally shaped zone. Anyway,
all right.
Iowa State doesn't fit into that for me. Excuse me. Idaho State doesn't fit into that North Dakota, South Dakota, Montana section there of the weather map. Idaho State I don't expect to be very good. And then UNLV only beats them 38-31. I'll tell you, mybookie.ag, I was all over UNLV giving the points. And I'm worried about Dan Mullen's team. They scored some points, but that was a fragmented win against what I think is a pretty average FCS team.
Yeah, maybe a below-average FCS team.
Polygon, by the way. Polygon is what I'm looking for. Thank you, everyone in the chat room.
Okay.
Yes,
all
yeah,
right.
okay.
Good, got it.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a program that hasn't made, I think, the FCS playoffs in close to 20 years. And so, again, this is what you happen when you play the FCS opponent. You don't take them seriously. You got a new coaching staff, a bunch of new players, and you go out and you lay flat and you don't play very well. My concern with UNLV going into the season all along is that they took two quarterbacks in the transfer portal that have been remarkably streaky, remarkably inconsistent, have shown flashes of being really good, and then been really, really poor in terms of production. They didn't just get one of them, they got two of them. So they split time between Anthony Calandria, who was at Virginia, and Alex Orji, who was at Michigan. I don't think Alex Orji is going to bring you enough in the passing game to really scare anybody. Anthony Calandria can, but he's got a penchant for throwing the ball to the other team. So, Dan Mullen clearly has a lot of work to do, but a win is a win. It was ugly. It wasn't pretty. They found a way to pull it out after, being down at halftime. And we'll see. I know a lot of people looking at UNLV as, being a potential not only Mountain West contender, but maybe one of those group of five dark horses having to contend with Boise within the same conference, but certainly not off of what we saw this past weekend.
Caleb, I do respect the Polygon. That's why I was trying to bring it up there. Lost the word on an early Monday morning, week one. Wicked Roller says, didn't take long for old Dan to ruin UNLV. He did inherit a program with some expectations this year in that Mountain West race. The other game involving a Mountain West team getting a win, Hawaii walks off Stanford 23-20. What an amazing story of Kanzai Matsuwawa. I think I butchered the last name. 38-yard field goal. He's from Japan, struggles with English, but said afterwards he was more nervous speaking English than he was on the final kick. Learned to kick on YouTube. What an amazing story.
So you're Hawaii. You have a kicker that learned to kick on YouTube, a quarterback hobbling around on one leg, and you still beat Stanford.
Yes.
I mean, holy smokes. I since moving into the ACC, we had Stanford one time last year. And God bless them. It is a long, long, tough road for them. And I appreciate what Andrew Luck's doing, what Frank Reich's doing. But that university as a whole needs to make some decisions on what they want football to be in this new world order, in what we are in right now. There was a team a year ago, and I know some things have changed. I think they have up to 14 transfers this year. Last year, they were in the single digits. But that was a program that we were informed when we broadcasted last year against SMU that the university would not admit into grad school Stanford players that graduated with a Stanford degree.
Wow.
Now let that sink in. So those players went and transferred somewhere else. Well, if that's the approach you're going to take, you got no shot. So I hope that the university as a whole is making some really distinct changes for the better to give this program a chance to compete because they've got money. I mean, you're not going to sit here and tell me that you're Stanford and when you're watching what we just talked about with Kansas and what's unfolding in Lawrence and you're Stanford and you're not going to make those same choices. So, hey, you're gonna live the season and live the program that you choose to afford.
Royal Payne says, back to the Japanese YouTube kicker, he says, early in the Saban years, who knew all Saban needed was to find a Japanese guy who could learn to kick on YouTube. It was that easy. Saban went all those early years of the dynasty with guys who were kicking paintings off the left side of your TV screen all season long. All right, so that was week 0 in the books there. Really some sloppy play, but not, had 5 games that were one-possession games, and it was pretty entertaining. This show usually will reflect more on the past weekend, not look too far ahead, because since we'll be a week out, we'll do a sneak peek at the end of every Monday Morning Live. But since this is leading into week 1, we turn into a preview show now, brought to you by our friends at MyBookie, mybookie.ag. Promo code Next Round gets you into the game right there. More details on how you can get that bet back bonus coming up in a second with Tom Luginbill of ESPN and the ACC Network. Let's go Alabama and then Auburn and then the other big games in the country. Alabama on the road at Florida State. I noticed this in my research over the weekend. True road games. Now, I admire that Nick Saban went out and had these neutral site games to improve Alabama's schedule quickly when he got there. The Clemsons, the Virginia Techs, the USCs, the Wisconsins, the Michigans. You got all those games to open up the season only because they were able to do the one-off neutral site games. It would have taken years to get home and homes with those teams onto the schedule. But Nick Saban knew they wanted some marquee games to start the year off to make the schedule more interesting, so they did that. But now we're to the home-and-home era for Alabama's schedule, and Greg Byrne and company have done a wonderful job. And you go on the road at Florida State. This century, it's only the second true road game. The other was forced by a pandemic at Missouri in 2020. Mm-hmm. Before that, it was 2000 true road game. I was there at the Rose Bowl. Bama up early, highly ranked in the top 5, and then UCLA beat them. So 1-1 this century in true road games to start the season. On the road at Florida State, you've followed this Florida State off season. What's this Seminole roster looking like? What kind of changeover has Mike Norvell and company gone through? Because Alabama fans here looking at Florida State's 2-10 and not that worried. I keep telling them, Lugs, this is a totally reworked car.
It is. The question you have to ask is it a more talented one with a healthier locker room? Because if you wanted to make a poster child for the name, image, and likeness / transfer portal highs and lows, it's the Florida State program, right? What can happen when you make great decisions and what can happen when you make disastrous decisions? That 2023 season for Florida State, every meaningful impact player that developed that football team was an incoming transfer. Trey Benson at running back, Jaheim Bell at tight end, Johnny Wilson at receiver, Keon Coleman at receiver, quarterback Jordan Travis, Braden Fisk, Jared Verse. I could go on and on and on. The following year, all of those guys leave at one time, and you bring in DJ Uiagalelei, and you haven't developed the high school core talent that you've recruited to be able to replace some of those upperclassmen and have a meaningful impact, and you go 2-10. So now you're going to reevaluate. You're going to have new leadership on offense under Gus Malzahn. Tommy Castellanos comes over from Boston College. Squirrel White comes over from Tennessee. Deuce Robinson comes over from Florida State, amongst a host of other players. I think the running back position is going to be really healthy. But I think what happened to that team a year ago just absolutely destroyed their locker room. There was no morale. There was no confidence. I didn't think there was a vision for they couldn't even somewhat replicate the level of confidence and production and execution that they had from a year before. So you look at it from this perspective, there's nowhere to go but up. With that being said, if we're going to be truthful, nobody knows what this Florida State team is going to look like. It's a little bit like projecting North Carolina with 70-plus new players. So to me, and I've broadcasted 4 of Tommy Castellanos' games, and I've seen him at his best, and I've seen him at his worst. My chief concern with Tommy Castellanos, a.k.a. Diet Kyler Murray, is when things are good, he is an absolute handful. Maybe in the conversation with the Jalen Daniels. When things are not good, he has not shown the ability and the mental toughness and the temperament to overcome that. Everything seems to snowball downhill on him. And I think that is the chief responsibility this year of Gus Malzahn, is how do you maintain an even keel of mental toughness, competitive temperament, worrying about what's in front of you, not dwelling on what just happened the previous player, the previous series, because that has jumped up and really bitten Tommy Castellanos, and he's got to get past that. If he does, he's a problem because he's so athletic. He can throw it. He can run it. You can institute quarterback run with him. You force all 11 players on defense to have to defend all 11 players on offense. But I will still say this. I don't think even with the changes that they've made, their roster is even close to what Alabama's roster is going into this football game.
Some thoughts on those subjects from our chat room, Lugs, and then we'll jump back in. Blake says, I would be concerned with FSU if the quarterback didn't keep giving bulletin board material for Alabama. Maverick says, Maverick Hammerfist, FSU is going to be a tough out. And then Royal Payne circles back and he says, hey, FSU's offensive line is almost all 5-year seniors, 5th-year seniors there. So some veterans there. How do they mesh together? You get a twitch if you're an Alabama fan just seeing Gus Malzahn calling plays on the other sidelines. He wasn't always successful, but he was able to beat a great defensive brain trust a few times when he was at Auburn. Mm-hmm. What does he do, you think, that used to cause Kirby and Nick a hard time, and how does Kane Womack, his style, differ from the way Nick and Kirby tried to play it, and how Kane may be a simpler way that maybe Gus's tricks won't play on Kane the same way they did on Nick and Kirby?
Well, I think when you look at the history of Gus Malzahn's most successful offenses, they've always been one that have been led by a dynamic runner at quarterback. All right, maybe there were some deficiencies in the passing game, and then some occasions there were not deficiencies in the passing game. But when you look at those offenses where you had a pure passer that was not a runner versus having a runner, entirely different level of production. So I think that's a positive if you're a Florida State fan, because Gus Malzahn wants to have quarterback counter, quarterback power, zone read, RPO. He wants the quarterback to strain the defense all the time. To me, that's a plus for Florida State, because if you're going into this matchup and you know the quarterback's not a runner, you have an advantage on defense. Now, when you looked at the history of whether it was Nick Saban, whether it was Kirby Smart, now Kane Womack, they've all had headaches defending athletic quarterbacks, whether it was Johnny Manziel at Texas A&M. They just change the complexion of what you want to be. They take you out of your comfort zone, and they force you to have to maybe deviate from your base principles. For me, I think this is about Alabama's front seven, all right, and the perimeter on the outside at corner, which is, I think, capable of locking down what is going to be Florida State's new targets to allow Alabama to play a lot of man-to-man defense, which is going to eliminate a part of the RPO game, all right? And it will put them in a position to account and walk down a safety to have a late hat in the box to defend quarterback run, because dominating or controlling the line of scrimmage with your front four gives Alabama an advantage. And in year two in this defense, we watched them a year ago, they started to figure out, hey, when we start coming after people and we just turn our guys loose, that's when we're at our best. Now you're in year two with the bulk of the roster back, particularly up front, and there's a better understanding of what is expected. There's a better understanding of what your coaches want for you to do on any given play within the execution of the scheme. I still think having a dynamic quarterback is dangerous, but when you have the better players, it gives you an opportunity to, number one, potentially take more risks, and to win one-on-one matchups.
Answer this for me. Tyler, and I know what he's doing here. It's a little bit of a shot, but Tyler says, once they fixed the lineman downfield rule, Gus Malzahn became just another read option guy. You know, there was a time that, you know, Gus's system could fool some defenders by making it look like it was a run, bring some guys up, and they would throw over the top, i.e. in the 2013 Iron Bowl game. Did you think some tightening of the where linemen are changed the way Gus Malzahn had success at his later years at Auburn, or Do you think that was just personnel issues?
Not at all. I don't think that had anything to do with it. I've watched college football and teams and coaches bitch and complain about, even now, is it 3 yards downfield? Is it 3.5 yards downfield? What's that, that leniency that you're going to give to a team that is a high-rated RPO team? And it comes down to each and every officiating crew, and it's probably not going to be overly consistent. So have offenses had to tweak a little bit, how they release their linemen, what they're able to do. I mean, you look at people running the slow mesh stuff and how they keep their offensive linemen back and not behind 3.5 yards. It's a craft. It's an art form. I think really towards the end with Auburn and Gus Malzahn in that offense, they just weren't as talented personnel-wise on offense. And also, there's some fatigue that can set in, right? You constantly have to evolve. You constantly have to tweak your offense as defenses start to settle in and really get a beat on what you're doing, and they come up with solutions that maybe when they first saw the offense in the initial iteration, they didn't have answers for. That's what coaches do in the offseason. They figure out the chess game of how to stop something, and that probably started to take its toll a little bit. And then, we'll see if Gus Malzahn has some other wrinkles and does some other things, with this football team and this roster, because any coach worth their salt is going to build their roster and their scheme around what their personnel allows them to do. And I think Gus Malzahn will do a good job of that.
Bubba Head says Bama's defense showed major issues with RPO, option run, and basically anything with misdirection. That's basically Gus's whole playbook. Did you see that with Alabama last year? I mean, a lot of people go to that Oklahoma game where Jackson Arnold ran all over them. Did you see Alabama struggling with RPOs last year?
Well, certainly in the Oklahoma game, I thought there was some of that in the Vanderbilt game. I don't think they really found their stride yet defensively. That was pretty early in the season. I don't even know if I would feel like that's exclusive to Alabama on defense. You watch college football across the country and you see what these offenses are doing now, and they're going so fast and they put so much strain on you. And then they put you in what I call a conflict of assignment, because unless you are so talented that you can just play man-to-man across the board all the time, you're always going to be in a position to be at a disadvantage when it comes to the RPO game, the zone read game, because what they're doing is they're essentially isolating a defender and they're saying you can't be two places at once. That doesn't just apply to Alabama. That applies to everybody. And so one of the ways to combat that is, can you play man-to-man defense predominantly and live in it? Because if you're playing man-to-man, there isn't somebody to isolate that can't be in two places at once, because they're accounted for everybody in coverage. So let's see in season 2. I think there's plenty of evidence last year that would say there were struggles versus athletic quarterbacks, guys that could create. And then, if you didn't feel as confident playing man-to-man defense consistently, you were going to expose yourself a little bit in that area. Let's see, because I think depending on how you either win up front versus Florida State or you struggle up front Florida State will determine what they decide to play coverage-wise if you're Alabama.
Alabama's the betting favored. One more Alabama question about their upcoming game at Florida State in just a second after I tell you our friends at mybookie.ag ready for you to jump in with all the excitement this college football season, including the game starting on Thursday night. If you're new to MyBookie, use our code, and your first bet up to $500 is fully covered. That's our code right there. Next round, QR code up entirely during this show for you to easily scan. MyBookie.ag, MyBookie.ag if you want to go there directly. Make your play, and if it doesn't hit, you get it right back with a bet back bonus. That's up to $500. No stress, just a one-time rollover on the return bet, so you're free to reload and keep firing. Sign up at mybookie.ag with code NEXTROUND. Claim your bet back bonus and make this football season the one where bragging rights come with a bankroll. Mybookie.ag, where bettors win together, because bragging's good, but cashing in is even better. Last Bama question before we move to Auburn and Baylor on Friday night. Ryan Williams, does he still have an upside? There are some people that are saying maybe he peaked early, and then what you saw towards the end of the year was the more of what you're going to get for Ryan Williams now that defenses have adjusted. What's the upside for Ryan Williams going into this year? It's still a lot of room to improve in my eyes. What about you, Lukes?
I think there's a ton of room to improve. There's room to get stronger, become a more physical prospect. Curious to know what his weight room habits were in the off season. Help get off of press coverage to be able to go up when you're contested and pull the ball away from a defender. We know what he can do in space. We know he's an elite level route runner. We know he can take the top off the defense. All right. So how do you add those other little nuances to your game where people go, okay, now all of a sudden this guy can get off of press consistently, or he's going to go up and he's going to elevate and he's going to take the ball away in a crowd. He's just too talented. I think there was a lot of focus on him, a lot of hype on him. Defense has really started to say, hey, if we're going to get beat or we're going to take one over the top, it ain't going to be by this guy. So you add an extra safety over the top. Maybe you get in his face a little bit more. And, one of the things I think Alabama will continue to do, and as a receiving core as a whole, is move him around, right? Don't have him always aligned in the same spot. Motion shift. He's in the slot here. He's out wide there. He's in the boundary there. Utilize him in a variety of where is Waldo type ways. But I do think strength, physicality, and going up when contested are three definite areas where we could see improvement.
All right, Tom Luginbill, Jim Dunaway with you. About 22 minutes still to go here on the show on Monday Morning Live, brought to you by mybookie.ag. We roll on now with Auburn on the road at Baylor, Friday night game. McLean Stadium there in Waco always looks like a good atmosphere on TV. Is it SEC-like? Will this place be cooking on Friday night?
Yeah, it will be cooking. It's a lot of fun. They did a great job when they devised that stadium. Sits right there on the water. Got a little bit of an overhang going around with a canopy in a horseshoe type setting, so it kind of traps the noise in there. I had Baylor in Texas in Waco a couple years back, and they get jacked up, they get rolling. Really high level of student section involvement. It'll be a Friday night. Kind of only game in town type of setting. So, yeah, it'll be a handful. And they're coming into the season with a load of confidence and coming off of a really good year after rebounding and, finishing with an 8-win season. So it's going to be interesting. I think it's a tough road contest.
We talk so much about Auburn's offense, but they're playing an offense in Baylor with their quarterback Sawyer Robertson back. But they were a top 20 offense last year, especially at the end of the year. What's the challenge that Baylor presents Auburn in this game?
From an offensive perspective?
Yes.
Well, first of all, the quarterback, Sawyer Robertson, he didn't start the first 4 games. Then he loses the first 2 that they started. He reels off 6 wins and looked like an entirely different quarterback. In fact, in that game that I referenced that I broadcasted with Baylor in Texas, they were forced to play with him because Blake Shapen went down to injury. And, Jim, at the end of that game, I thought Dave Aranda was done. We were talking as a crew. We're like, if that's what they are at quarterback, they've got no shot. So I give Sawyer Robertson a ton of credit for how he has revitalized not only the Baylor offense and the Baylor program, but himself, reinvented himself, because he was not ready for prime time that day and really struggled to come up with meaningful, consistent production, and looks like he's really grown and developed, probably mentally more so than anything else. So he can stretch the field. He can push the ball vertically, big arm, not a dynamic athlete, but he knows where to go with the football, and he's got a really healthy run game behind him despite the injuries to Pendergrass there in the backfield. But it's still a heavy run-first style of play with heavy play action coming off of it to try to push the ball downfield.
Nobody knows what we expect from we know what we expect from Jackson Arnold. Nobody knows what we'll get from Jackson Arnold in his Auburn debut. You break down the tape. You know what this kid was in high school. You know what happened to him at Oklahoma last year.
Yeah.
What should we all expect from Jackson Arnold in this debut?
Well, when he came out of high school, one of the things that was so impressive about him is he played at such a high level consistently for so many years against a high level of competition, and his greatest trait was accuracy. He knew where to put the football on time, showed anticipation and decisiveness. and then had the opportunity to kind of work himself into the rotation at Oklahoma. But just as with everything else, there are other factors that are involved in the success of the quarterback. And when he just so happens when he took over the reins at Oklahoma last year, they went through the first 6-7 weeks of the season and didn't have their top 5 or 6 targets. They're playing with walk-ons. They're playing with guys that didn't belong on the field. You couple that with the fact that Oklahoma was nowhere near what they should be in the offensive line, and they couldn't run the ball. So now you got this inexperienced, young, talented quarterback with nothing going right around him at all. And so, I think the refresh and the ability to press the reset button is good for him. You now add in Eric Singleton, Horatio Fields, and Cam Coleman around him, an offense that I think should really benefit him because just as I said with Gus Malzahn, Hugh Freeze has had a lot of success with quarterbacks that he can utilize in the run game. And so I'm hoping the new location, the new environment allows us to see the best of Jackson Arnold. Now, we've all seen what transpired in practice last week and, the social media post of Hugh Freeze losing his cool with Jackson Arnold. The fact that, this hasn't been a runaway separation clearly throughout training camp between, your other 2 competitors at the position. Does that cause for concern? Maybe, possibly. When he says that he may play 3, is that gamesmanship or is the fact that they haven't been able to settle on a guy because somebody hasn't pulled away and they want to see what they do with live bullets? I'm going to be very interested to see if that's what they do, regardless of who starts. Even if Jackson Arnold didn't start, if all of a sudden Deuce Knight comes into the game and he's a freshman, how does this offense look? So I'm a little surprised that they haven't been able to just have a pull away, runaway starter and that guy not, being Jackson Arnold from the beginning.
When Rosie Langelo of WSFA asked that question about him throwing the hat, I could tell she knew that wasn't that big a deal, but I think she also knew that Hugh was sort of doing that for the TV cameras. That Hugh Freeze to me looked like he was letting everyone know he was coaching his team a little hard. He'd gotten a little press, I believe, especially from Any Given Saturday on Netflix, that he was more Baptist preacher than he was football coach. And I think he peeked over to make sure the WSFA cameras and everybody was rolling. Now I'm going to throw my dadgum hat here, and I'm going to give Jackson Arnold a piece of my mind. And look at me coaching some ball up here.
I would have been pissed at Jackson Arnold too because the angle of that play in the clip, he's holding on the ball for so damn long. And the guy in the flats just standing there as a check down. It's like, throw it to him, man. Let's go get. I see what Hugh Freeze saw too. There may be a lot of credence to what you just laid out there. Sending a message not just to his team but to the media of how dialed in he is. But at the same time, like I can see why that late in training camp, you don't take that check down right now. That's concerning.
Yeah, Jackson. All this talk about seeing other quarterbacks or anything, it's crazy. Jackson Arnold's team. I will ask you this though, Eric Singleton. You saw him a lot last year. This guy's a space eater, and what will he do for this Auburn offense? Already talented a receiver. What does he bring to the table?
Speed, top off the defense. Speed. One of the fastest players in college football. Uber productive. Totally different offensive approach. And listen, Haynes King's really good. Right, so you had a lot to work with there in that Georgia Tech offense last year. So now you're adapting to a little bit more of a true spread set, which could be a good thing, and a new quarterback that doesn't have anywhere near Haynes King's experience or production. But from a talent perspective, I thought it was a huge acquisition in the transfer portal.
Yeah. Me too. Excited to see what this Auburn team looks like.
Yeah.
Interesting game. So happy it's on a Friday night. Virtually a standalone game for me. I'll have Georgia Tech, Colorado on another screen, but I'll be dialed in on Auburn and Baylor and get the opportunity to fully enjoy this one. Two teams that hope when the season is done, they're in the, at least when you get to November, in the college football playoff conversation. Other week 1 games in a second. Once again, I want to remind you, our friends at mybookie.ag, they bring you this opportunity every Monday morning to recap what we saw over the weekend. Your first chance to listen on your way to work or jump in and comment about things that you saw, want to get off your chest about the weekend. And you can have a little fun this football season with our friends at MyBookie. MyBookie.ag, promo code next round, easy to jump in, QR code and all that right there, MyBookie.ag. Rolling along now all the way to for another 10 or so minutes, and then we'll turn it over to the next round, guys. Let's go to the other game on Friday night real quick on all these, Lugs. We're just going to fly through some games. Georgia Tech and Colorado also on Friday night, opposite of Auburn and Baylor. Haynes King and that offensive line, that seems to be a great combination for possibly a magical year in Atlanta.
Not only that, but the replacements in the transfer portal at wide receiver, Jamal Haynes at running back, a defense that is at all three levels the best one that Brent Key has had. I saw them in practice about 2 weeks ago. My only concern about them is handling the hype. Are they vastly improved? Yes. Should they be really good? Yes. Does Haynes King and Jamal Haynes have to stay healthy? Absolutely. But if you just look at them on paper and you say, could this team be real good? Could this team contend in the ACC? I think the answer is no question. They make it so difficult to defend them because Buster Faulkner, who just got re-signed to an extension and a significant raise as the offensive coordinator, puts so much pressure on defenses with everything pre-snap happening so fast, with multiple shifts in motions, multiple personnel groupings, multiple formations, but actually very few plays, X's and O's. It's limited plays with eye candy and window dressing, and he puts so much pressure on you before the play even snaps that he invariably forces people into making a bust or screwing it up, and then they take advantage of that. So it's going to be super intriguing. And then on the other sideline, what are we going to have at quarterback with Colorado, right?
That's right.
How good is Colorado's roster top to bottom? As I've said this for a few years ago, we always hearken back to it. But without Travis Hunter now, without Shedeur Sanders, have they bulked up and developed the rest of the roster? Would love to see Caden Salters return to his form in 2023. If he doesn't, then you're going to see a freshman in Juju Smith. And the question you ask yourself is he ready? Is he ready for that moment? Is he experienced enough? Is he mature enough? We don't know that question. So Colorado, to me, is going to be more fun to follow this year, maybe more so than the last two, because there's other questions that haven't been answered yet.
Texas and Ohio State's the big game in the country. In some polls, it's 1-2. It's 1-3 in another. We haven't seen a kickoff game like this since 2017 when Alabama and Florida State played in Atlanta. Manning and Saying at quarterback, but I think really when you talk about this game, you talk about defense. Both of these traditionally are really good defenses, both top three last year. They've got to fill some holes. Who do you think has a defensive advantage in this Texas-Ohio State showdown?
I think Texas does in the front seven. Ohio State probably does in the back end. But as a whole, I would give the edge to Texas. But I do think it is incumbent that both defenses test the young, inexperienced quarterbacks early. Pressure them. Come after them. Can they identify pressure? Do they know where to go with the football? Can they throw with people in their face? Can they extend the play? Find out just how ready those two guys are for prime time. Because I think in a game of that magnitude with the defensive personnel, the quarterback that not necessarily makes the most plays, but avoids the most mishaps and mistakes, gives that team the best chance to win. And I think that's one of the best storylines, Jim, not to go off on a tangent here, though, in all of college football, is look at the quarterbacks that are having to be replaced at blue blood programs.
Yes.
Alabama, Georgia, Ohio State, Michigan, Texas. I can name there's a couple others out there. You combine that with the fact that everybody else in college football is loaded at quarterback. This might be the best group of quarterbacks to come back to college football over the last 20 years. But with the blue blood programs in this week one, like, the performances are going to start to define what these teams could be. And again, without making knee-jerk reactions, it's important that those guys play well, but most notably don't screw it up.
Yep.
And they're going to hand you the keys. You don't necessarily have to race it, just drive it straight.
And I think that's where Arch Manning getting a few starts under his belt is going to help Texas in this game. I think it's a tough game for the Longhorns, though. LSU Clemson in Death Valley there in Clemson, South Carolina. Peter Woods and that Clemson defensive line going against a reworked LSU offensive line. I know they got a lot of talent over there, but that is a tough challenge on that offensive line for LSU to be on the road, but not just on the road at that place, against those dudes on the other side.
Yeah. There's at least 3 draft choices along the defensive front 4, 2 of them first-rounders, as you just mentioned, for Clemson. Sammy Brown may be the next spectacular thing at linebacker in college football, the true freshman coming off of a monster year last year. And they've got Avion Terrell at corner. They've got NFL players at all 3 levels, better leadership on defense under new coordinator Tom Allen. And quite honestly, with LSU, the pressure's all on them. They can't play. They haven't performed well in openers. They haven't been ready to play. Clemson, with what they've got coming back, how they reinvested into their own roster, Dabo Swinney not deviating from his philosophy, no matter what the pressure has been on him to do so, is the reason why he has this team in this position right now. I think this is a daunting task for both teams. For both teams, I really do. But being able to play this game at home for Clemson is huge. And I would say, conversely, this would be huge if you were playing in Baton Rouge in LSU's favor. So how does LSU handle the road environment? Can they get over the hump of not playing well in openers and being prepared, whether it's in the kicking game, whether it's in execution, that has plagued them each of the last couple of years? And I think on the other side is, can Clemson handle the hype that has been bestowed upon them? Because a lot of people finally think, okay, this is a 2019 type Clemson team. This is a Clemson team that has been primed and built for a college football playoff run to a national championship appearance, and everybody's patting them on the back. You open at home with LSU, and if you're an ACC fan, right, you have to change the narrative. Your ACC teams have to go out and win their non-conference games. Miami's got to go out and beat Notre Dame, right? Clemson needs to beat LSU. Florida State needs to beat Alabama. If you're in the ACC and there's a negative narrative, the only way you change that is playing well.
What's the narrative if and I think I'm horrible at picking games, but right now, forget the betting lines, just the W, I would take Ohio State and Clemson, the 2 home teams. What's the conversation if the SEC wins everything else but loses those 2 high-profile games this opening weekend? Feels like there's a lot of pressure on the SEC to stick their flag in the ground in at least one of those games.
Yeah, I think there is, but we hear all of this talk about college football playoff expansion, or we talk about how are we going to seed it, and we also talk way too much about what happens in these early games as if the sky's falling. There's 12 teams that are going to make the playoff. There's so much football to be played. Clemson goes out and gets blown out in the second half against Georgia last year. They make the college football playoff, right? So I don't put too much credence into how the results could negatively or positively affect any one of these teams. The SEC's got a narrative advantage, and I think they've got a narrative advantage along with the Big Ten that benefits them regardless of whether or not they were to go out and win these opening week games. They're going to be able to prove their mettle within the conference over the course of time. For the ACC, that's different. Right? The ACC has to come up with a way of attacking other conferences by winning on the field. That's the only thing that changes it for them. So I think the SEC just sits back and plays football, regardless of what happens in a week 0 or week 1 scenario. And then they figure it out week to week.
I will tell you, Brett says Clemson by 10, his prediction right there. Carlos says, I think Ohio State and Clemson pull them off too. She's agreeing with me there. So that's pretty interesting that people are actually agreeing with me on our first Monday morning live. Hey, real quickly, before we get out of here, tell everybody where they can see you all season long, the place to catch Luganville the most. You're on a lot of platforms, but other than Monday Morning Live, every Monday, 8 a.m. Central Time, where else can they get Luganville?
Well, each Monday night I'll be on ACC PM on the ACC Network. I'll do College Football Live each Tuesday afternoon every week. Got to travel on Wednesday for my Thursday broadcast with Matt Berry on ESPN each and every Thursday. We'll have Sports Center preceding that game, Sports Center on campus. And then for the first time in a long time, I'm going to be back in the studio each weekend. So I'll leave for my Thursday contest on Friday. I'll fly up to Bristol. Got a 2-hour show on ACC Network on Friday night. And then I'll do Sports Center hits throughout the weekend and be in studio for ACC Network throughout the day on Saturday into the early morning hours. And so 7 days of work or travel for me this fall, each and every day, each and every week throughout the 2025 season.
Yeah, Jerry says he hopes it's fun inside the studio. Always looks like fun. You get to watch all the games. I know you're excited about that, being back in the studios. And we're excited to have you back here on Monday mornings with us all season long. Audio platforms, video platforms, wherever you get the Next Round. Tell your friends about that. And don't forget, it's all brought to you by our friends at MyBookie. MyBookie.ag, promo code next round. If you're first new to the app, MyBookie.ag, use our code next round, and your first bet up to $500 is fully covered. Make your play, and if it doesn't hit, you get it right back with the bet back bonus. It's all right there. MyBookie.ag, promo code next round. Lugs, we'll talk about Week 1 games next Monday. You have a great week. Safe travels, buddy.
Thank you, buddy. Can't wait. What a great way to kick it off, pal.
The Next Round is coming up live in about 8 minutes. Hang around, folks.